If you care about understanding the contracts responsible breeders utilize to protect the puppies they place with forever homes, then you might want to pay attention to today's episode where we explore dog contracts. Now this video is going to be a long-form video, so set yourself up with a snack and some pop, settle in your comfy chair. This video is supremely important if you're in the market for a new Dogo Argentino puppy, because all responsible preservation breeders use contracts as a way to structure their sales. This video is also very important if you personally have an interest in breeding your own Dogo Argentino, because it brings up many things you might not even think about, which can truly determine your own success or failure in breeding dogs. In today's YouTube video, we're going to delve into understanding the dog contracts breeders use, so you'll know what a dog contract is and what every contract will entail, why you need one, whether you're a breeder or an owner, when you should sign a contract, and why signing a contract at the wrong time can put your new puppy in jeopardy. Who will the contract protect and why that protection matters for years to come. Where the dog contract is enforced, what it means to you, your pup, your breeder, and why the where can be as important as the what. Now before we dive in, if you haven't been here before, hit that subscribe button and then click the bell icon so you'll never miss one of our weekly videos. A dog contract is an agreement between the breeder and the new owner regarding the duties and responsibilities both parties have to the welfare of the Dogo Argentino puppy and to one another. So what's the purpose of a contract? Well, first of all, it avoids misunderstanding, miscommunication, and malfeasance. Next, it clarifies the duties, the rights, and the obligations of the breeder to the new owner, and of the new owner to the puppy, and that's why contracts are so important. Contracts give both the breeder and the new owner legal recourse if either one doesn't happen to follow through with the promises they have made to one another and to the puppy itself. Contracts preserve the dignity and the care of the pup as an individual and to the entire Dogo Argentino breed as a whole. Contracts protect the investment in the work that the breeder has put into his or her bloodline by controlling breeding rights, and they protect the new owner's investment into the promise of a healthy pup from that bloodline. Contracts help to protect the general public and the pup from negligent owners by forbidding dog fighting and other forms of abuse. They set a standard of breeding protocols to enhance the breed as a whole and to discourage backyard breeding. Contracts protect the investment of the new owner and that investment that they make in the puppy by providing remedies for health problems that are genetic but not immediately apparent when the puppy is placed in his or her new home. Contracts will save a new owner from dropping that Dogo Argentino puppy off at a shelter, a rescue, or abandoning it in the streets if his or her circumstances change and he or she can no longer care for the dogo. And of course, contracts clarify exactly what pup the new owner is purchasing and exactly what is included in the purchase price, how it can be paid, and what is not included. Pro tip: ear cropping, the third set of puppy shots, spaying and neutering, delivery, shipping crates, shipping charges, AKC registration fees, etc. are not typically included in a pup's price. Breeding rights may or may not be included depending on what you have negotiated with the breeder. So why do you need a contract whether you're an owner or a breeder? Important question, right? Contracts show the breeder's integrity because they write out legal remedies made to the new owner if the puppy is found out later on to be genetically unhealthy. Contracts show the new owner's integrity by his or her promising to do the right thing by the Dogo Argentino. And contracts spell out everything that is agreed to by both parties, as well as legal penalties for failure to comply. So when should you sign a contract, and why signing at the wrong time can put your pup in jeopardy? Well, of course, you should only sign a contract after you've read it thoroughly. If you sign it before you read it, you are still legally bound to the contract terms. There isn't a do-over clause because you didn't read it. You should only sign the contract if you understand what promises you are making and what promises are being made to you. Again, after you've signed the contract, if you don't understand what the terms of the contract are, you are still legally required to fulfill the duties of that contract. So if you have questions, you need to ask before you sign, not after. You should only sign if you know every aspect of the sale, such as the price, the gender, the breeding rights. You don't want to sign a document with unknown terms. And of course, it's super important that you never put down the deposit first and sign a contract second, because exchanging money before agreeing to the specifics of what you're getting for your money is a very bad idea. There is no way to guarantee the terms of the contract will be to your liking, and verbal contracts are so flimsy and impossible to prove in a court of law that you should basically never assume a verbal agreement is a good idea. So if you were to place a deposit on a verbal agreement and change your mind without a written contract, it can be difficult, if not impossible, to retrieve your deposit. You want the agreement in place first and the deposit second. Now, you can go to a single meeting, you can read the contract, and if you feel comfortable with it, you can sign it and pay that deposit in a single meeting if you're comfortable. But I never advocate for locking in mutual obligation after the deposit rather than before. So, who does the contract protect? Well, of course, first of all, a well-crafted contract will protect the pup from abuse, backyard breeders, and neglect. A contract protects the breeder by ensuring the investment in his or her bloodline is respected from a legal standpoint. A contract protects the new owner by ensuring that his or her investment is in a healthy puppy. A contract protects the community by ensuring the guardian instincts of the Dogo Argentino dog are tempered with proper care, helping to ensure it doesn't become a dangerous animal. A contract protects the entire Dogo Argentino breed by controlling which animals are bred, how they're bred, and to equally worthy specimens. And in this way, a contract can truly affect the course of the entire Dogo Argentino breed. So, where the contract is in force and why the where can be as important as the what. Well-written contracts list a provision for where, geographically, the contract will be heard in court if there is a legal dispute. This location inevitably favors where the breeder is located, since it's most convenient to the breeder, who is the person who writes the terms of the contract. And think about it. If breeders have multiple litters over the course of years, there could be many puppies located all over the world. It's just not feasible for them to go to many different locations if there is a disagreement legally. It's just one of the areas where breeders are selfish. You have to come to them. Some contracts may call for resolution through arbitration, and in this case, the arbitration will be ruled by the geographic location listed in the contract terms. So, if, like me, your breeder is located in Virginia, then you're going to be working under Virginia arbitration rules. Now, some states require you to actually go to arbitration first before you can go to court in civil matters. And that is one of the things you want to make sure is nailed down in the contract, whether you can go immediately to court or whether you have to go to arbitration first. This is important because if you have a dispute that requires legal intervention, you will need to travel possibly with the Dogo Argentino in tow with you to the location of that legal dispute that is documented in your contract. If you fail to appear in court, even though it might be a civil case, you are most likely automatically going to lose. The courts do not look kindly on having their time disrespected. Now, some breeders will not sell Dogo Argentino pups internationally because there are significantly more hurdles enforcing contracts internationally for private individuals. Even for large corporations, it's very difficult to have contracts that can be successfully enforced across country lines. I myself do not sell my puppies internationally for this reason. And this means even if you sign a contract with a foreign party, your recourse is very likely none at all for non-performance. So imagine you as a breeder selling a pup to a person in a foreign country, and you find out later through the wonder of social media that that person is dogfighting with a pup, but you can do absolutely nothing to stop it. How would that make you feel? Or imagine you're the new owner and you bought a pup from a foreign breeder who is dishonest, and you've been sold a puppy that was blatantly misrepresented. You probably can't do a thing, realistically speaking. Now, this is not to say that there aren't dishonest breeders and dishonest new owners in your own location of origin, because there definitely are. But in contract law, you have a much better chance to prevail in court in your own country than in a foreign place, especially if you're not fluent in the language of the foreign court. I'm not saying you can't find honest people all over the world, because you certainly can, but it is a risk, and it is a risk worth mentioning that you might not be in the position to contractually prevail in a foreign case even if you're in the right. So let's talk for a moment about how contracts are typically organized. Now, most contracts cover several areas, and because contracts are a reflection of what type of life the breeder ultimately wants for their puppies, and a reflection of what the breeder values, they will vary in the way they're put together. The way the breeder writes the contract will vary just like their bloodlines. In my mind, and feel free to disagree, a breeder who doesn't care enough to use contracts isn't a person I personally want to deal with, because contracts are a two-way street, providing protection and legal remedies for both parties. To me personally, not using a contract is a huge red flag that the parties are not willing to stand behind their word in writing. Most contracts will start out listing the parties. That means the breeder and the owner by name, as well as the contact details of each party. Next, most contracts will list information about the puppy, including its price, its date of birth, its gender, its hearing status, its microchip number, its parents, if it has any outstanding marks like a pirate spot. It will list the cost, how it may be paid, when it must be paid, what happens if it isn't paid, as well as what is not included. For example, some vaccines might be included, some might not be. Hearing tests might be included, but ear cropping might not be. Shipping might not be included. It's going to go over each of those details if it's well crafted. Usually, the contract will delve into the care that is required for the life of the Dogo Argentino. Typically, this is going to list good quality food, access to fresh water, regular exercise, routine vet care including vaccinations and heartworm medication, flea and tick prevention. Often you'll be required to provide shelter inside the home. You are likely to be specifically barred from keeping the dog outdoors on a tie-out or chain. You may be required to provide obedience training, socialization, mental stimulation, and affection, and all of those terms are meant to A, give the puppy a great life, but B, protect the puppy from becoming a powerful, muscular dog that is aggressive and dangerous to people. Some breeders are going to require owners to own their home and provide a fenced yard, with the idea that owners that have that built-in stability are less likely to surrender the dog than renters. Others will sell to anyone regardless of their living situation. If you go to a responsible breeder, there's going to be a health guarantee, and this is one area of the contract that varies greatly breeder to breeder, and it is probably the single most important area of the contract. Most contracts guarantee the puppy will arrive healthy, but they also require you to take the pup for a full veterinary checkup within 3 or 4 days of receipt. And if you don't do that, it will usually void the entire health guarantee. So make sure you prioritize that initial vet check. Now, guaranteeing the puppy will arrive is important, because if you are shipping a puppy by air, you would hate to think that the puppy died in transit and you spent a bunch of money and got no puppy. Some contracts are going to specifically not guarantee that the puppy arrived, because ultimately, if the breeder puts the puppy in the kennel and hands it to the airline and it's alive and it dies in the airline's care, it may be that you have protection through the airline, who are the ones who ultimately cause the puppy to pass away, rather than the breeder. So that's something that needs to be documented very clearly in your contract. Making sure that you get that initial wellness check is also so important, because you want to make sure that the puppy is, as it was guaranteed to be, healthy upon arrival. I recommend pet insurance to be taken advantage of at this time, because it's going to be the cheapest it will ever be when the puppy is little. And in order to take advantage of the health guarantee in many contracts, you have to provide veterinary evidence that's independently verifiable by the breeder's veterinarian, and that could include things like costly x-rays or other tests. And if you want to know more about pet insurance, check out my video on that topic. Now, any health issue that is confirmed in the initial checkup by the new owner and is confirmed by the breeder's veterinarian, the pup can usually be exchanged for another pup of equal value. But then, once that exchange has taken place, that clause usually releases the breeder from any further liability, and shipping costs are not generally covered on that type of exchange, just so you know. Dogo Argentinos frequently suffer from congenital deafness, which is linked to the white coat color. It does not mean the breeder is bad. This is a known problem with dogos, and sometimes it just happens. Statistics vary, but generally we think about 10% of pups will be born unilaterally deaf, meaning deaf on one side, or bilaterally deaf, meaning deaf on both sides. But this is generally not covered in a health guarantee, because a responsible breeder is going to test the pups before they're sold at 6 or 7 weeks old, and a responsible breeder will provide these results with the contract, being transparent about the pup's hearing status. Personally, I would not buy a puppy without these results tied to the puppy's microchip number, so you know you're getting exactly what you pay for. If you want to know more about the pricing of a Dogo Argentino puppy, I do have a video on that as well. Now and then, a different type of congenital defect will appear. Unfortunately, with purebred dogs, congenital defects become more common the longer the breed has been around. Dogo Argentinos are no different than any other purebred in this regard. And I explain this more in a video about breeding genetics, which you can check out if you like. Thankfully, this breed is relatively young as breeds go, and it enjoyed a good deal of outcrossing in its creation. However, nature being unpredictable, you may get a defective pup through no fault of the breeder. Breeders will probably ask you to return the pup, or they will promise a replacement pup. You are not going to generally get your money back. You can either get a replacement pup if you return the pup, or if the breeder doesn't have pups at that moment, you may get a promise for a future breeding, because obviously not all breeders have puppies at all times every day of the year. There may be a wait. Cherry eye may or may not be covered in your contract. Although it is not super common in dogos, I personally have only heard of 1 or 2 cases. Pups are generally guaranteed to arrive free of parasites, but there is no long-term guarantee because, of course, parasites can be picked up outside in the environment. Normally, the parasite guarantee is only until you get that dog checked in its initial wellness. So it shouldn't arrive with fleas or ticks or worms, but that guarantee is about 3 days long on average because fleas, ticks, and worms can be picked up in your backyard at any time through no fault of the breeder. And really through no fault of yourself. That's just something that's present in the environment. Now, some bloodlines suffer from allergies, and I think it is incredibly important that you ask about allergies in a breeder's bloodline. I am fortunate that my dogs do not suffer from allergies, but a dogo that we have a regular play date with suffers horribly from allergies. I did not breed that dog. They got them from someone else. And that dog literally is so miserable. And I feel so bad for that dog. Now, if you happen to get a puppy that has some allergies, I am going to list a few affiliate Amazon links that have some products that can be helpful. If you're interested in the description, you don't have to go that way if you don't want to. But allergies is something that I would ask about, and I think it's something that people frequently don't think to ask when they're looking into getting a puppy. The most common health guarantee term is going to usually be 1 to 2 years, and it will typically only cover genetic diseases discovered within that time. And it's typically not going to cover accidents or injuries because the breeder has no influence in that at all. So what exactly is covered varies quite a lot. For example, some breeders are going to cover hip dysplasia, while others are not going to cover hip dysplasia. Hip dysplasia can be a genetic condition, but it can also be influenced by the environment. So for example, if you early spay or neuter a dog, you have roughly a 20% chance of increasing the case of hip dysplasia developing. If you do lots of crating, meaning if you crate your dog for 8 hours a day and you work 5 days a week, that can heavily contribute to hip dysplasia. If you don't exercise the dog, if you do improper impact sports like frisbee before the dog's skeleton is fully formed, if you do weight pulls or other impact like urban mushing, those can greatly contribute to hip dysplasia through no fault of the breeder. So large dogs typically suffer from hip dysplasia more than small dogs. And that's just a known thing. Some breeders are not going to cover hip dysplasia because while it's genetic, there's also a huge number of factors that are environmental that the new owner is responsible for. So some don't cover it, some do. Again, you want to read what is covered in your contract. So legal remedies to new owners for genetic defects can also vary greatly. The most typical remedy a breeder might offer is to get your purchase price back in return for giving the pup back to the breeder, who is most likely going to have the puppy euthanized and dissected to learn about the breeding defect, which clearly very few people are going to want to do. So a second remedy might be to literally get a new pup in exchange for the genetically defective pup. And that remedy might be you've got to give me the pup and then I'm going to give you a new pup, or it might be you get to keep that genetically defective pup, but they're going to give you a second pup of equal value, but they're not going to cover any of the medical costs for the genetic treatment. So they're giving you a replacement, but they're not going to cover the cost of health care. Or you can give them back the puppy and not deal with the cost of healthcare, but understanding that for the purposes of science, many breeders are going to have the puppy euthanized. So many breeders are going to expect to verify the pup's diagnosis with their own veterinarian in order to avoid fraud. A well-written contract will provide specific provisions in the case of a diagnostic disagreement between the veterinarians. So say you as the breeder have your vet look at hip x-rays, just as an example, and your breeder thinks they are fair and the new owner's veterinarian looks at the hips and says they think that they are bad, not fair. Well, that's going to be a disagreement, and normally there's going to be a contract provision that talks about what happens in the case of disagreement. Usually, it's going to be kicked to a third or a fourth veterinarian for their opinion, and the majority will prevail. If you have not purchased breeding rights, which is also called limited registration, your Dogo puppy will be marked not for breeding on its AKC litter registry. Now, I'm using AKC, but this could be UKC, FCI. I'm just using AKC because it's the largest registry. And if an unscrupulous individual were to try to breed the Dogo Argentino anyway, behind the breeder's back, zero of that Dogo's offspring would be able to be registered as purebred at all. And this is to discourage backyard breeding. Some breeders will further require proof of spaying or neutering directly from the owner's veterinarian before they'll release any new papers to the new owner. And both of those are basically to discourage backyard breeding, because a puppy that somebody is claiming is a Dogo but has no paperwork is significantly less valuable. And so that's one of the ways that breeders try to control and discourage backyard breeding. Now, if you have negotiated and purchased full breeding rights, you will have the ability to breed your Dogo and register its offspring as purebred, assuming you breed them to another Dogo. Generally, full breeding rights are more expensive because there is a value to the fact that you are breeding animals of value. And the full breeding rights are sometimes called full registration. And many times breeders are going to have contractual conditions that are meant to preserve the integrity of the breed. Typically, requirements would include waiting until the Dogo Argentino turns 2 years old, which is important for the skeleton to be fully mature. Your Dogo breeder might require pen hip checks or OFA certification. The breeder might require approval of the mate, which is actually excellent for the new owner because it means the breeder cares enough to ensure the best possible outcome. If there is zero control of the breeding process after the pup is sold, to me personally, that's like a huge red flag that either the breeder doesn't care what you do, even if it's completely wrong, they are intimidated by you as a competitor and they don't intend to help you at all, or they're just in it for the money and they actually don't know how to help you. So that to me, if they are not requiring approval of the mate, that is a huge red flag. Now, having a restrictive contract causes any breeder, myself included, to lose sales from every single litter they ever have. But it actually helps the breeder understand immediately who is wanting to breed for the right reasons and who is in it for the wrong reasons. Some people get totally bent when they read that there are promises that they have to keep for the preservation of the breed. And if they don't see the logic of wanting the best for the Dogo Argentinos, to me that's just a major red flag. To me, and feel free to disagree, if you think wanting to legally ensure that you are doing the right thing is unreasonable, then you are literally either extremely naive about what the general public is capable of, or you are simply someone who should not be involved with Dogo Argentino breeding. That is my opinion. The breeder is going to know how to compensate for any flaws your pup has. And believe me, no dog is perfect. And I'd be wary of anyone who says a dog has no flaws or weaknesses. And what they're going to do is help pick out a mate that balances the two dogs together to give the most optimal outcome. And having control by the breeder of the mates you choose, this gives you free guidance, free mentorship when you're starting out. And it should be clear in your contract what mate qualifies as acceptable, and that should be clearly spelled out so you know that you're not just getting every mate you pick out rejected. You need to know what the bar is. But to me, a breeder wanting to be involved in what happens to her dog's puppies that she sells to others and wanting to help. If you don't want to take advantage of that free information, that free resource, that free source of information and education, really kind of question in my mind, what kind of person are you? It's rare that somebody knows everything. I learn things all the time, and I've been a second generation dog breeder, dog trainer, dog fancier. I've done it since literally birth. My mom, may she rest in peace, was a dog breeder, a dog trainer, a dog shower. We had lots of different types of animals, and I will be 50 years old in June, and I still think there are lots of things I don't know about. There's lots of things to learn. So if you're closed off to education, and every once in a while I'll find somebody in the dog fancy who is this way, where they just have such a huge ego, they think there's no flaws with any of their dogs, they know the best, and they almost become mean and hostile about it. I'm thinking of a very particular Dogo forum on Facebook. There's a few people out there who just think that they walk on water and they know all there is to know. I think that attitude is harmful to the breed and is dangerous, because I don't think anyone knows everything. And so if you are not interested in the breeder helping you out when you yourself want to breed, I have to question why you'd be going to that breeder in the first place if you didn't value their opinion and their education and what they'd have achieved in their dogs. Now, many breeders are going to require that the potential mate be of similar quality with similar health and temperament testing, similar age, titles, as well as a 4-generation pedigree. And this is basically to ensure high quality pairings that are likely to add good quality to the Dogo Argentino breed. Now, if you happen to already own a Dogo that you're wanting to buy this new pup to mate to the Dogo you own with breeding rights, you need to be totally upfront with the breeder so that you're legally protected that that pairing is acceptable. Now, a pro tip is that there is a difference between a breeder being available to help you for the rest of your dog's breeding career and a breeder doing all the work for you. Now, your breeder should totally be willing to look over some pedigrees of a dog that you picked out that you want to use in your breeding program. She might or he might suggest particular kennels whose bloodlines she feel would work well with the bloodline that you have. But they're not going to email those people. Likely they're not going to obtain the paperwork. They're going to expect you to do some part of the breeding. They're not going to do it for you. You know, you're supposed to be taking on the role of someone who is learning about the breed. You're not, you're basically not buying a servant who's going to do all these things for you. So it is important that you look into certain things yourself. You know, some of the things that they're going to expect you to do on your own is they're not going to Google every reproductive vet in your area and pick out the best one. They're not going to interview all the ear cropping vets around you unless you guys happen to live in the same city. If you live in the same city, they're probably going to say, hey, this is a good vet, this is a good ear crop vet, this is a good general practitioner, or this is who I use. But if you live several states away, they're not going to Google and interview those people for you. They may tell you how to do it and what you should look for, but they're not going to do the work for you. So temper your expectation of help. They're going to help, but they're not going to do all the work. Now, breeders typically are going to require you to title the Dogo Argentino by competing in either obedience or hunting trials or conformation. And the reason a title is important is because it's an independent opinion of the conformity of the Dogo Argentino and its fitness to contribute genetically to the breed as a whole. I am a big believer in titling dogs. I don't think you have to have a title in all three areas, meaning obedience, hunting, and conformation. But to me, in order to contribute, it shouldn't just be my opinion that the dog is amazing. It shouldn't just be your opinion that the dog is amazing. It should be an independent person going, hey, that dog is amazing because it's a great conformation dog, or it's an amazing obedience prospect, or it does fantastic protection work, or it's insane at hog hunting. To me, that just adds legitimacy and confirmation that what you think and what I think are confirmed by someone independent. Now, some Dogo Argentino breeders, especially those with hunting lines who hog hunt, are going to want the Dogo to be hog tested before it's bred. Some hunters are extremely passionate about hog testing and feel only those pups who show great hog instincts are worthy of being bred. While other breeders whose focus is not hunting, they might value other types of testing, such as temperament tests or bite tests for protection training prospects. Let me know in the comments below if you'd be interested in learning a little bit about temperament testing. So many breeders are going to insist on health testing, and nearly all are going to want the results sent directly to them from the veterinarian, which helps guide their own breeding program. It gives them feedback. So what types of tests are required and by whom they may be administered varies greatly. For example, breeder number 1 might want you to test hips, elbows, patella, dentition, eyes, hearts, and thyroids. And breeder number 2 might really only care about hips, but they might also expect genetic testing. And breeder number 3 might insist on allergy testing in brucellosis. Some might accept testing done by general practitioners, meaning your garden variety veterinarian, while others might require specialists, such as a cardiologist. The former being far less expensive, but sadly less accurate than the latter. Now, it is a nearly universal term to bar anyone who takes a Dogo Argentino puppy from a breeder to be sold in a pet store, to a puppy mill, to a reseller, to a wholesaler. Obviously, no one wants to be connected to that industry of misery. And many breeders will write in a contractual penalty for failure to comply, which could be anything from collecting a massive monetary fine as well as repossessing the Dogo Argentino itself. And fines could be anything from collecting all the monies earned by breeding outside the conditions of the contract until the terms of the contract are satisfied, or repossessing the Dogo Argentino itself. Another common area in the dog contract is commonly referred to as a take-back clause, and it offers the right of first refusal to take back any Dogo Argentino in the case that the new owner is unable to honor his or her commitment of providing a forever home to the Dogo for any reason. And this can provide huge amounts of security for the Dogo Argentino owner and for the Dogo itself, so it never ends up in a shelter, a rescue, or thrown out on the streets. Naturally, the new owner is responsible for the cost of returning the Dogo back to the breeder, and no money is returned for that dog, just as a shelter isn't going to pay an owner who surrenders their dog. This provision is solely to keep the Dogo from the gas chamber. Most contracts will not guarantee a pup will perform a particular way in any competition, given that the breeder has no control over such events. For example, if I were to sell you a show prospect puppy, it is a prospect. It is not a guarantee of winning performance, and event prospects are no different. These things can't be guaranteed because so much of whether or not a particular prospect will do well in its performance sport is based on the handler. Did you train the dog? And if you didn't, you are not going to likely do well. And that has nothing to do with the breeder. It has everything to do with the training. Most contracts forbid purchasing a Dogo with the intent to resell it. Straw sales are universally frowned upon. One of the ways that breeders try to thwart straw sales is by microchipping their puppies and listing themselves as the owner for the first 2 years, which gives them the ability to repossess that pup if it gets sold to a puppy mill or a reseller. And no matter how much you as a breeder try to find the best homes, no matter how many times you Google that potential homeowner's address, name, and background to try to ensure that they're telling you the truth, there are people in the world who are trying to do the wrong thing for their own twisted and evil gain. Now, there should be a clear contractual limit of that microchip listing to be transferred after 2 years to a new home or whatever, but that's one of the ways that Dogo breeders try to keep Dogos out of the hands of puppy mills. And as of the publishing of this video, there isn't thus far a huge problem with puppy mills. There is a breeder that some people consider a puppy mill in California. But generally speaking, you don't have, for example, the Amish or the Mennonite or the Hutterite peoples, which are believers in puppy mills because they don't believe animals have souls. There isn't so far a problem with them and dogos, but TikTok, it may be coming now that dogos are accepted into AKC. Some contracts are not going to specify a particular skin ticking pattern. Skin ticking is the black pigmentation spots on the dogo skin, but not the fur. So these spots increase with age, and at 8 weeks old, your puppy might not have any spots on its skin other than on its nose, but at 8 years old, that same Dogo Argentino might be completely spotted or ticked. And they're not going to guarantee that because there's just no way to predict how that's going to develop. So pro tip, it's important that you update the images you use in your veterinarian's database because the dog's ticking pattern is going to change dramatically over time. And you don't want the dog not to be recognized in an emergency care situation. And this is so important if you own more than one dogo. You don't want them looking at the nose and going, well, that's dogo A because it's super black and not dogo B because when I saw dogo B, the nose was mostly pink, but that dogo B was very young. So you just want to make sure there's no confusion there. So I want to thank you, my audience, for your incredible support and kindness. You guys totally rock. I am so very fortunate to have recently passed into being monetized, which helps support the channel, so I can continue to make cool new Dogo Argentino videos for you guys. Please never hesitate to let me know what you're interested in because I appreciate and read every single comment I get. I read them all. I even read the comments from haters. I thank you so much for your feedback and your support and your viewership because I'm working to help you out. Thank you so much because this is a channel that's designed to make your life with your dogo easier. It isn't designed as a replacement for the relationship you should develop independently with the breeder you got your dog from. And as always, I can't take the place of a paid professional veterinarian or a paid behaviorist or a paid dog trainer, but I am trying to help you guys out with education that is helpful on a general basis. And as always, please feel free to like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. And as always, I wish you guys a dogo-tastic day. Thanks. Ciao. I am a lean, mean, goose-killing machine. I'm going to get those geese. Oh, look, they're leaving. Maybe I won't get the geese. That sucks. Oh, wait, there's one left. I'm going to get that goose. Oh, wait, there's more. I'm going to get him. I'm going to get that goose. I'm going to get that goose. I'm going to jump in the water and magically get that waterfowl. It will be mine. Its demise is near. Oh, flying away from me. I see you, cagey goose. I see the way you are. Just so unfair, taunting me, flying away easily from my pond as I work so... There's one. There's one. I got it. I got it. I got it. No, I don't need help. I got this. I got this. Sure, those geese are going to tell stories to their brethren about how they escaped the clumsy dogo, but I know in my heart I am a goose-killing machine. I'm going to get that goose. I'm going to get it. I'm going to get that goose, and I'm going to tell stories about the geese that I got. I got it. The end is nigh, my geese enemies.